Where did you learn you're really good at these?
Doing a quick mic check. You guys hear us okay? Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started.
Good for you to know.
Welcome to the Higher Education Correction Council meeting. I'm Representative Melissa Ballard, the co-chair with Senator Mike McKell. And we have a number here in person and a handful online. So thank you for being here and being invested in higher education in our correctional facilities here in Utah. I'd like to approve the minutes if there's a motion for that.
I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Dan Bakavoy. Any comments to that motion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so moved. Those minutes have been adopted. And so we have some new members that we'd like to welcome. First, we have Danielle Pedersen, who is now representing an adult basic education in the Utah State Board of Education office. Let's see, Danielle, yes, you're online.
Yes, I'm online.
Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. So replacing Stephanie Patton on this team and excited to work with you all.
Great, thank you so much. And I know I've already had some conversations this morning with some who want to make sure they can align with you. And if there's any of these higher education classes or college prep classes that would also count towards high school credit. So I know Ensign College, I've asked them to reach out to you for that. So that's great. We also have Megan Rice, who's the Prison Education Director, and also is joined by Ellen Young, Vice President of Online Education. Is Megan with us? Oh, I was like, I don't see Ensign College here, otherwise I would have looked right over there. So you are both from Ensign College.
Yes.
Welcome and thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you.
And where are both of you from?
I live in Holiday, actually, so not too far.
And I'm from Kaysville. We're excited to join this conversation. Megan will be representing us on a regular basis.
Great, thank you. Thank you for being here today. And then we also have Kelsey.
Gressman, yeah.
Cressman?
Yep.
Oh, Gressman, yes. And you are now the new, why don't you explain your new title? We're happy to have you here.
Yeah, I'm the Corrections Administrator for the Department of Corrections, and my role is mostly going to be to help coordinate the contracts and oversee the interactions that are happening between the Department of Corrections and the contracts.
So
You can fill
she formerly, Kenzie Jones was in this position. She's no longer with the department, but Kelsey's main role will be to oversee all of the higher education within the Utah Department of Corrections. But that in turn will lead over into all of education in the Department of Corrections. So she is going to be our educational expert. And she's amazing. She's really excited. She actually officially starts on November 3rd. She wanted to come here and get started early.
You know, that's the excitement that we all have. We can hardly wait to get in this space and help with higher education for our inmates. So thank you so much. Well, welcome. We've got with the four of you here. Appreciate you being here. So first we have an actual presentation from Ensign College. Since you're new to the table, and we'd love to have you present and give us an update of what you're doing with.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for giving us an opportunity to take some time today and explain our program. One of the things that we wanted to walk through was just an overview of our program, some of our objectives, and some of the sticking points that we're excited to get advice from our more seasoned peers in this space on this project. So I'll just wait
Second, working on it.
that's okay. So our official objective is to provide inmates with skills and knowledge that foster both spiritual and moral character, as well as job readiness, supporting successful reintegration and lowering recidivism. One of the important roles that Ensign College has been tasked within the greater CES church education system is the applied curriculum provider. So Ensign College, while it does offer all the way up to a bachelor's degree, has what we call a certificate first model, where we focus on job readiness, job skills, and applied curriculum. So we are taking this model, this objective from CES and incorporating it into our prison education program. Go ahead, next slide. Thanks, Richard. This is our first official cohort. They started October 30th, 2024. We had 20 students in that cohort. This was their first milestone. We call it professional foundations. They completed it on at the end of May 2025. We had 19 out of 20 complete. One of them had to be transferred to Antelope, and so hopefully we can get him once he's back. But they were a really great pilot cohort. I'm sure all of you know who Joseph Smith is. He's the founder of our church, but we found something really interesting in our project, that when he was running for president in 1844, he actually, as part of his presidential platform, called for prison reform. And we love this quote from him, that rigor and seclusion will never do as much to reform the propensities of man as reason and friendship. Let the penitentiaries be turned into seminaries of learning, where intelligence, like the angels of heaven, would banish such fragments of barbarism. We believe that the glory of God is intelligence, and there's light and truth that will help us and help our students overcome some of the barriers that are part of their experience. Go ahead and next slide. Thanks, Richard. So these are three of the strategic pillars for the Department of Corrections. And we want to make sure that whatever program that we bring in is in line with those strategies, as well as complementary to the other educational offerings that are currently being presented. So we met with SLIC and Davis Tech and Snow College and tried to come up with ways to add to the portfolio of educational offerings. And we came up with 6 certificates. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. Oh, sorry, there's some animations in there. I meant to take those out. We came up with 6 certificates that we feel would be beneficial for felon-friendly employment, but also complementary to other opportunities that they have. And those are project management, small business and entrepreneurship, digital marketing, technical support engineer, accounting, and hospitality and tourism. Those skills certificates lead to employment opportunities, and we are confident that they'll be a value add for our students. So this program overview is it's based after the BYU pathway model. So they start with 3 courses, which we are calling professional foundations. There's ENS 100, 102, and 103. They have, I'm gonna go over some of the outcomes of those courses in just a minute, but those courses are 7 weeks each and really do a great job preparing students to be college ready. And right now our program terminates at the first skills certificate. That's where our accreditation is approved through. But we hope that we could offer some future paths to an associate and bachelor's degree somewhere down the line. Representative Ballard had asked us about transferability. Ensign College courses, which is what these are transferable to pretty much any institution in the state of Utah and outside of the state of Utah as well. Students transfer to SLIC, they transfer to Snow College, they can transfer to the University of Utah, et cetera. So even though we don't currently, as part of our prison education program, offer an associate's or a bachelor's degree, these courses would easily transfer.
So I think what I appreciate in that is I would love to have you work with our institutions of what the classes are that they do have, or how it would align with if they with our USHE institutions, both in the correctional facility and then also working with Richard for if they get out of corrections, how that also applies
Yeah.
for specific USHE credit, because I think
Yeah.
if they are taking these classes and you don't have certificate level 2 yet, that it definitely helps them towards this pathway of completion in many regards.
And that's a great comment to clarify that we have not created any new courses for our catalog for our prison education program. So the courses that our students are taking are identical to our campus courses. So yes, we can go through and make sure that we understand where those transfers are, but our campus catalog transfers pretty much. So these aren't prison education courses, these are campus courses offered to USCF and COCF. So yes, if they were separate courses, we would want to make sure those transfer, but so far we know that they do. Thanks.
If I could
Yeah,
yes,
piggyback on
of course.
that, and just with the preface of how excited I am that you guys are in and that this is just gonna be so wonderful to have this opportunity. And I see the collaboration that can happen is something that's going to really help a lot of individuals. I wanted to suggest that perhaps what we should do is plan out perhaps like a once a semester time when we as Salt Lake Community College can come in and talk to your students specifically about the transferability of their
Sure.
credit.
Absolutely.
Because it is a little bit different. I mean, although the credits transfer over since the structure of the education
Right,
program,
right.
it's confusing to me. So I know it's going to be very confusing to those who are incarcerated as to, and we're already inundated, like, how does this class work? And
Exactly.
so working together.
That'd be great.
Yeah, once a semester.
Maybe we have just like
can do
a
that.
transfer fair or something like that.
Yes.
And
I
we
love
talk them
that.
all through. We talk them. They have a lot of questions about just even transcripts, and now the transcripts are all digital. It's really hard
Yeah.
to navigate that. Yeah, that'd be great.
Excellent.
I'll follow up
I
with that.
love that. And then building on that, one of the concerns I've had is completion for Ensign students after they leave the prison, because
Mhm.
it's my understanding that that individuals with felonies are not allowed to take classes on campus specifically. Is that correct?
That's correct. So
Okay.
right now, our commitment to our students, whether they're in or out, is to finish the first skill certificate. Because our program is fully online, they don't actually need to come to campus. And the future paths would also accommodate that policy, that we would have a fully online track for them to be able to complete to a credential.
My experience has been is that it's difficult for our students to complete classes once they leave prison and
It is.
online
It's
because
really
of lack of
difficult.
technology experience
Yeah.
and things. So collaborating
Yeah,
like this will
that's a
be
great- yeah.
essential because we will be able to, through reintegration efforts, we'll be able to help those students and pick them up
Yeah,
and get them onto our mainstream campuses to
Exactly.
complete.
exactly. And we do actually have, there is a process by which someone with a criminal history could attend our campus. A lot of our students wouldn't qualify for those, but there is a possibility there. But yes, I think again, this idea of like a transfer fair and talking them through some of the jargon around higher education and transfer would be really beneficial.
Thank you. I'm so excited and I love this because the collaboration is going to help a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure.
And
So
our hope is that students get connected to the program that's the most beneficial for them. And so it doesn't really matter to us what school they get that from.
Sure.
We'll just, if they start in our program, they're gonna be better served by a different program. Let's get them connected to that.
Yeah,
As soon
and
as
make it really
possible.
easy.
So I think that's where I think it's very beneficial outside of this meeting for you, particularly since you're at the main facility with corrections, to coordinate with Salt Lake Community College and also Davis Applied Tech College to see specifically how that certification completion helps either meet some of the requirements that you have towards your certification or associates, or just so that they understand that. So I think they need to know, and you need to know how you can align if there's some adjustments that might need to be made, but also for that continuity of education. So that's great. Thank you. And then, as I mentioned, I think those professional foundations are more kind of pre-college courses. So I would love for you to work with Danielle to see how those can be CE classes for those who are trying to get their GED as well. So it's both, even though you do not require a GED, if we can, we want to double dip as much as we can,
Yeah.
right? We're
Yeah.
limited on time while they're under the roof of UDC, so we want that double dipping where we can.
That's great. Yes,
So I have a question.
of course.
Okay, so I'm Becky, I'm
Hi,
a former
Becky.
student. Nice to
Nice
meet
to meet you,
you. I love what you're doing. I think we met
Yeah,
at.
that meeting, yeah.
Yeah.
It's great to see you
Okay,
again.
Yeah, it's good to see you. So with, when you have students leave and they want to continue with your course, are you able to supply them with the technology to continue? Because I know for myself, it was just hard, you know, getting a cell phone and getting my
Yeah.
license and
Yeah,
all of those
yes.
things that are, you know, that you have to, you know, traverse and whatnot, but to
Yeah,
have that technology
are-
where they have a
yes.
laptop, Chromebook, whatever.
So we
is
just got,
available.
we just have started to connect with local school districts. Local school districts have a lot of surplus technology that they have, like Davis School District very generously donated about 20 laptops to us that they had in their surplus warehouse that they just wiped, and then we're able to give them to students. So there's a lot of foundations that we're starting to connect with and connect students with where we can give them those.
So when they leave, they would have
Opportunities,
that and be able
yeah.
to continue online
Yeah,
with
yep.
your, okay.
Yeah.
And I
wonderful.
have to say thank you. That's such an
Yes.
incredible partnership for reentry.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And for this continuity of completing education and being able to be a functioning adult
Yeah.
in our society. So those donations and coordinating for reentry is just awesome.
Yep. Yeah, we have a lot of really, really generous people that want to help contribute to our project. We're so grateful for it. Okay, you can go ahead to the next slide. Thank you. So in our very limited year of doing some research, we found 6 really great pillars that we think are going to be helpful, that data supports as helpful as recidivism. I do not need to go over these with you, but what we've found in the last year that we're really encouraged by is that our program is trying to intentionally address each one of these pieces of data. So go ahead and go to the next slide. Thanks, Richard. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our student experience and how it connects back to these 6 pillars that we think are going to make a big impact as far as reentry and rehabilitation. So this is basically what our student experience looks like. So they start in what we're calling professional foundations. They're completing their coursework online. They are attending institute and worship service. That's their scholarship. So their program is scholarshiped and those are the requisites for their scholarship, that they attend institute and worship service regularly. Each week they attend a gathering. I'm going to go over what that looks like. That's the one synchronous component in professional foundations. They're in a cohort of about 20 students, and there is a volunteer couple that facilitates that gathering. And then they have, like all church education students, an ecclesiastical endorsement. Once they finish, so those are 3 courses, they're 7 weeks each. Once they finish it, we give them the Professional Foundations Award. It's got some credentials that they can put on a resume. We've got some stories about how it's helping them get better job placement, et cetera, and then they move on to their skills certificate. And again, they're completing their coursework online. They're attending institute and worship service regularly for their scholarship, and they receive an ecclesiastical endorsement. What future paths would look like would be completing coursework online and an ecclesiastical endorsement. So that's a
What
little
does
bit.
that mean? I'm sorry.
An ecclesiastical endorsement just means that you have an ecclesiastical leader. It could be a member of the church or a chaplain, someone else that endorses it's basically our honor code.
Okay.
So you don't have to be a member of our church, but you do have to have an ecclesiastical endorsement.
Okay, thank you.
In your case, you'd meet with your bishop once a year. And he would ask some questions about participating in our program, and then he would give you an endorsement.
Thank you.
What I think is really beneficial is if we go back to that factors that reduce recidivism is a sustained community and church support and religious participation, right? That we're encouraging that as part of our program and scholarship. All right, go ahead to the next slide. Thank you.
I apologize for the construction.
That's okay.
going on.
That's okay.
Quick question though, while you're on this slide still, not to take us back to the articulation conversation, because we definitely have another one due after this.
Yeah.
But if you mentioned that high school completion is not a requirement, then how does that influence transferability once they go into taking some of these courses.
So they're taking,
If a solid community college requires high school completion, how does that? Because my rule of thumb as a former, student recruiter was credits transfer, degrees transfer, credits may or may not.
Can I respond to that?
go ahead.
So our main goal is to help them get marketable skills as they're coming out of prison. We're trying to time it so that as they're coming out, then they can go and get into jobs in a fairly broad range of jobs. That's our primary goal, plus the spiritual foundations. If additional higher education is beneficial to them, we don't want to block that in any way. So if a student knows they want to go to another school and they're going to take our credits with them, then they'll need to make sure and satisfy those requirements. Like if they need a GED or high school equivalent, then they're going to need to satisfy those. And if we can do it through concurrent enrollment, even better, because then they can match those credits. But we're really not trying to be an onboard to other schools. That's not our design. We're really trying to focus on those marketable skills that help them get jobs as they get released from prison.
And to clarify, I think high school equivalency would only impact an admissions process for 2 of our 16 institutions. I don't anticipate that it would impact the transfer process. If those courses are already earned through a higher education entity and students have the competencies in them, they should transfer. I don't think registrars in our state look at, oh, did you graduate high school before you got these? I don't think that would happen. And so I think what we can do is take your list of courses you offer and map them to USHE courses and what, if anything, may come in. I think that there might be some of the classes that you offer that wouldn't transfer to USHE institutions. And that's the same if a student took them at Ensign College, they just wouldn't come into a USHE institution. And the same happens for our institutions going to you. So it just happens, but we are happy to take that list and map them out. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and my understanding is of how it works is that although the credits would transfer to our institution, a student would not be accepted unless they could state that they've had the GED or the high school degree.
Yeah.
So, but that's something that we could then,
Yeah.
we could take on and present
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
monthly, or sorry, not the semester meetings where we're explaining to students
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
they need to do
Exactly.
to go. And then we could have, it's exciting to me because especially in the men's facility, a lot of students really want business. That's really, they want a bachelor's in business, and we have an associate's degree available, but some of the classes can be difficult for us to provide on a regular basis. So if they can, but those are the classes that you guys are bringing in. So with what I could see happening is that they start there, then they come and then get the associate's degree with Salt Lake Community College and then move on the way up through the University of Utah. And that we have this pathway that allows for that type of, and so
Right. And
we can
again,
take that on.
that's why when we vetted our many certificates that we offer, we wanted to choose 6 that were complementary to any
Thank
of
you.
those tracks. So
That's
yes, thank you. So I mentioned that each week our students have a gathering. This is the one synchronous component in our whole online program. This is a place for them to build a new network, for them to make connections with fellow students. They stay with the same cohort for all 3 classes. So they spend 21 weeks, 1 hour a week, going through a midweek curricular support, right? So whatever the assignments are for that week, the gathering supports those assignments and they do a deeper dive on those assignments. This is just an example from week 1. This is starting next week of what that 1 hour experience looks like. It's a really cool opportunity for people to come in and visit and get a flavor of our program. So if any of you want to come and visit one of these gatherings, we're happy to have visitors. And we have found that it's a really meaningful connection for these students as they're trying to break out and move away from certain behaviors. They have, 19 other people who are engaged in that same endeavor with them. Once these cohorts terminate at the end of 21 weeks, they are voluntarily gathering on their own and staying connected in a way that's really positive. So that's an example of our gathering. Go ahead to the next slide. Sorry, this one has animations as well. These are the course outcomes of our 3 college prep courses that I wanted to just highlight really quickly. And This is the first course they take. It's called Life Skills. It's got basic math and writing outcomes included in those as well. These are the courses that are, if you're familiar with the BYU Pathway curriculum, these are the same courses that are taken globally by students. And they're a really good, it's a really solid curriculum for college prep. This is a response from one of our students who is demonstrating some of these outcomes, especially with confidence and the ability to pursue an education. We know there's a lot of trauma around education for our students, learning how to learn. I'm really just so encouraged about how much they help each other, how much they interact with each other. I was just telling Alan this morning, so our students, because this is an online program and they only really have their tablets regularly to work on, it can be really difficult for them to access a computer, and that's something that we're working through. But right now they sign up for a study hall in the Bear Education Lab, and they have like 2 hours once a week to come in and work on a computer, and they come in and they work so furiously, like they just spend the whole 2 hours hammering out their homework. And we have one student who's a little bit older, and he was really struggling with his basic paragraph assignment. And this other student who he came in, he's like, oh, I have so much homework to do, and he's just working really hard on his project management courses. Took about 45 minutes of his time, of this precious time, to help this other student who was much older navigate the curriculum, navigate how to understand Canvas, how to understand the feedback from his instructor. And I was so touched by that. I could have jumped in and tutored him, but I was really touched by this opportunity for him to demonstrate that he could, turn around and help someone behind him. And I was so touched by that. That he would, in this precious 2 hour time, take about 45 minutes to help a fellow student understand the assignment. So go ahead and go to the next slide. The next class we have is 102, which is our professional skills class. This is a very accurate AI interpretation of one of our students, Dylan. He really does look just like that. And he's actually one of our paroled students. And so I want to highlight his story as part of our 102 class. So he was released I think in October of 2024. And in about March, he was the lead student. So this gathering is a student-led gathering. So it gives them some leadership skills, communication skills, presentation skills, etc. And he was talking about how he was really struggling to get a job. So he'd been out for almost 6 months, and he said he had applied for over 100 jobs and hadn't been able to get anything. The assignment that week in ENS 102 was resume writing, and in the gathering, they were practicing mock interview skills, interviewing skills via a mock interview assignment. And the men in his cohort just really rallied around him, and they talked about how to, put things on his resume, how to address his criminal history without, being overly apologetic about it, but also being really confident about his skills. And he came back the next week and he was just beaming. He got a job. Like it was the perfect thing that an educator wants to hear when they're trying to achieve outcomes, right? But he was finally able to land a really good job. And that was just a really encouraging experience for us to see that this curriculum can really have a good impact. Thanks. Sorry, there's another animation there. So our last class in that professional foundations is ENS 103, and this is really focused on college prep and beginning the next steps in their educational journey. This is a student who I've interacted with several times, and they have to write what we call a persistence plan, and this is an excerpt from his persistence plan. And it's really just encouraging to see how much hope and how much confidence is coming their way via these academic pursuits. And we all know this as educators, but I think it's really encouraging for me that he specifically calls out his role as a father and a community member, and that he's really wanting to continue his education as part of this persistence plan. I think there's one more slide. Oh, there's 2 more slides. Okay, so I'm going to try and wrap up really quickly because I know I'm a little over time. So this is what an actual roadmap to a certificate completion would look like. We run our classes on a block schedule, so we're not on a semester. We have 6 blocks. that run year round. So a student could start our professional foundations and finish like a project management certificate in just a little under a year. That's an aggressive timeline, and that has them doubling up on classes, which we haven't actually had them try out yet. But we're hoping that we can get there, especially when we have some better technology solutions. And then the last slide are our success metrics. We have a cap of 300 students. We currently have 254 active students. We are averaging a throughput of about 85%. Our persistence, especially in the beginning and in that transition from the college prep to the certificate level, is much lower than we'd like it to be. We have about half of our students who have completed their professional foundations badge that started. And then we haven't yet been able to measure our temporal self-reliance goals. Our spiritual self-reliance, which is important to our project, shows that Sunday Worship and Institute is up by about 10 and 15% respectively. So we're really excited to further collaborate and get some help on how to help our students persist and show more success so that we can grow our programs. Any questions?
I was just talking with Chief Honey. I think it's great as you're working on resumes and you're working on resumes and you're working on resumes, that there's a place, you know, at the onset for this to be a working document that inmates can continually add to and build upon, which is real life, right? Updating your resume. And so being able to have a place on their tablets for that continuous opportunity is great, instead of just trying to cram it in right before they leave. So thank you. It's great. It's exciting to hear the partnerships and also the college prep and all those things. So thank you. Really appreciate it. All right, next
We have a question.
Oh, we have a question. Danielle.
Not a question, but a comment. I know we talked about concurrent enrollment, and our adult education policy guide already allows for us to issue high school credit for any college or university class that students are taking. So if you just add that to your transcript, we can transcript it as well. We do that at a rate of 1 high school credit for each 3 credit semester hours. So in that pathway example, each of those foundational courses could be counted as a high school credit.
Fantastic.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, next we have a report from the Board of Pardons, an update from you.
All right, so Representative Ballard had asked me to talk about incentives that the Board of Pardons and Parole offers for program completion, and as well as just generally how the board might fit into the Higher Education and Corrections Council. I wanted to introduce my colleague Brett. He's our newest board member who was just appointed, but Brett had been with Corrections before that, and then moved to the board in 2014, and has been with the board since 2014. So he has a lot of information, and he volunteered to come and help me present some of this information as well. So I'd like to encourage you to welcome him today. So thank you. Before we get into it though, I think it's helpful for us to think about what are the purposes of the criminal justice system. And if we can have just a discussion, if you could just, there's no wrong answer, but what are some of the purposes of this system that we have, criminal justice system?
Provide offenders with maximum opportunities to make lasting changes through accountability, education, and treatment.
Great answer. I love that. Sounds-
ChatGPT that.
I love that.
He set me up for that. He's my brother. So.
We planned that. We planned it. No, I do. I love that answer. That is one of the right answers. There's lots of purposes, right? But what's interesting about Utah is our Utah code, the legislature has defined for us what some of those purposes are. And I think it's fascinating. If you want to look at 76-1-104, this is the criminal code. This is the introduction to the criminal code. And our legislature has put down how to understand and interpret the criminal code, the criminal statute, and to think about the purposes, the larger purposes of the criminal justice system. So 104 talks about the provisions of this code shall be construed in accordance with these general purposes. So to interpret the criminal code, you look at these general purposes. And the first one is one, forbid and prevent the commission of offenses. That's the first purpose, is public safety, to make sure that people are not committing offenses. Number two, define adequately the conduct and mental state which constitute each offense and safeguard conduct that is without fault from condemnation is criminal. So to have due process, to clearly outline what activities are criminal and what are not, so that we as the public can be put on notice. It's a due process issue. Number three, I think this is really what I wanted to talk about here to introduce this topic. Three, prescribe penalties which are proportionate to the seriousness of the offense. Okay, so we have to think about the seriousness of the offense, and which permit recognition or differences in rehabilitation possibilities among individual offenders. So rehabilitation, the legislature has come out and said, one of the main purposes of the criminal justice system is for us to recognize the rehabilitation opportunities of each individual, right? Isn't that beautiful? That they've defined how we are to interpret these statutes. And then finally, to prevent the arbitrary or oppressive treatment of persons accused or convicted of offenses. That's not allowed. We're not allowed to treat people oppressively and arbitrarily. So I bring that up because one of the main purposes, and it's exactly what you were talking about, it's the rehabilitation is one of the primary purposes of the criminal justice system. And if you look at the history of the parole system, I think it's very interesting, and it also goes to this idea of rehabilitation. So parole, the idea of parole started kind of in the early 1800s, and there's a lot of differences in opinion of where it started basically, but essentially there's some people in Australia, criminologists, who start coming up with this idea of parole. And then I thought it was very interesting, that quote from Joseph Smith talks about a parole system in essence, that you could have these seminaries of learning and allow people to change. Well, those very ideas were kind of sweeping through the United States in the early and mid 1800s. And it started kind of on the East Coast and swept out to the West Coast. So when Utah becomes a state in 1896, it adopts into its constitution the Board of Pardons and Parole. It's a constitutional body. It's created, and one of the main purposes of that is because in Utah we have indeterminate sentencing. So instead of getting 10 years for a second-degree felony, you get 1 to 15 years. Instead of 25 years for a first-degree felony, you get 5 to life. So it's indeterminate. And then you have a professional body that's created in the Constitution of a board who will make those determinations. And it's a very difficult process to try to determine what the best result and outcome and should be in any parole decision, because we have to balance all these different factors, and not just how well somebody's done in the institution. Of course, that is such an important factor, but also the proportionality of the crime and the victim impact and how they've been doing in the institution otherwise. So there's lots of, and some of those things are in tension. And so it's difficult to make these decisions sometimes. But we definitely, as a board, we're going to consider the rehabilitation opportunities of individuals who have been incarcerated. So that's kind of like the general outline of the purposes of the criminal justice system. And you have to recognize that rehabilitation is one of those purposes, and the board's role in that. And the statute specifically, now as far as incentives, so 77-27-5.4 was created, the statute. So 77-27-5.4. And that directs the Board of Pardons and Parole in collaboration with Corrections, the Department of Corrections, to establish an earned time program that reduces the period of incarceration for offenders who successfully complete approved programs designed to reduce recidivism. So there are two types of cuts. We have mandatory cuts and we have discretionary cuts. The mandatory cuts are a part of, you have approved programs. So we have residential substance use treatment programs, we have sex offense treatment programs, we have high school education degrees, we have associate degrees and bachelor's degrees. All of those are part of a mandatory time cut, that if somebody completes one of those programs, then they get a 4-month time cut. There's also a discretionary time cut that the board can consider if somebody gets, because people can get up to 2 of those mandatory time cuts for different programs that they've taken that are part of their case action plan. So they can get up to an 8-month time cut. But the board also has some discretion in that as well. So if a person has done exceptionally well, the board has discretion to give more earned time. So that is a possibility, that's in the statute. And we also have an administrative code that follows this statute as well. But we have statutory requirements to provide mandatory and discretionary time cuts. And Brett, is there anything else you want to bring up about like mandatory, discretionary, or?
No, I mean, it's an important collaboration with corrections, and that these approved programs, there's no set time frame of when the approved programs are reviewed, but when it happens, it's through reentry division and the board, and we list all those programs out, and that's good because programs come and go. Sometimes, you have a program at a jail, for instance, they lose a therapist, that program goes away. So you're constantly kind of reviewing those, and only those programs that are on that list and that are successfully closed down on the individual's CAP or case action plan trigger this automatic process. And by automatic, I mean, again, CAP gets closed, program's done, it goes to corrections determine, if a release date is possible, like if someone doesn't have 4 months left. We don't want to grant a cut and then have to turn around and take someone's date away because they don't have time to get out. So there's coordination there. It comes to the board. We have staff that process it. And then others, as Dan said, that maybe don't meet these approved programs or their multiple vocational or, a third program, then we have a process that those are presented to the board and the board reviews those and can approve. And there are some exclusions. Individuals who are on life without parole or our life sentence, generally speaking, they don't qualify for those. And then the other part that's important to know is in order to qualify for this time cut, they actually have to have a parole date. If they haven't had an original hearing yet, or they have a rehearing, if they don't actually have a release date, the board will still acknowledge that time cut, but there's nothing for them technically to cut that 4 months. So at a hearing that occurs sometime in the future, the board can factor that in and then potentially release below, and give them some credit for the 4 months that they would have earned.
And that is one thing we struggle with the offenders. The offenders believe that they're not going to get a time cut if they don't have a date because they only see it on the ones that actually do have a parole date, but we're educating them that no, that will go into factor when the board gives you your date. They will factor in those time cuts. It's just an education piece on our side that they have a hard time understanding that.
Hey, can I ask two quick questions then? I had a conversation recently with a student inside the prison, and he told me that we were talking about finishing his associate's degree. He said, yes, I'm going to finish that. I'll qualify therefore for the time cut. However, and I don't remember what his sentence was, but let's say it was the 5 to life. So in other words, he said, I have to serve at least the 5-year minimum. I cannot get the mandatory time cut and leave 4 months before the 5-year marker. Is that accurate? Is that of how the system works?
That's true.
Why don't you take that?
I mean, it probably depends on the circumstances, again, because the first question that comes to my mind is, does that individual actually have a release date? And the reality is probably more than likely, again, in our indeterminate system, if somebody has a minimum sentence of 5 years, their release date is probably going to be beyond 5 years.
Yeah.
So So a lot depends on that, whether they actually have a release date. If a mandatory time cut was going to move someone below a minimum sentence, and that would probably be one that would get presented to the board, and the board would have to review those circumstances and determine whether a cut would be made. The other possibility is, again, they may not have a date yet, so they would get an acknowledgement, and then at whatever point that next hearing occurred, then they could factor in that positive thing that they accomplished in there.
Okay, thank you so much. And then my second question on that was, can a student who completes an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree for that matter, can they put in for a special and to be able to be seen early by the Board of Pardons because they've completed one of our degrees?
I can help answer that. So the answer is, it all depends on, it's a case by case. So if they complete that and they have already had if they already have a release date, we send in a special attention, just letting the Board of Pardons know about that new information. So a special attention is clearly just providing new information to the Board of Pardons. However, if somebody completes a program but does not have a date, let's say they have a hearing a year from now, we will include that in their packet that we submit prior to the hearing.
Okay.
So the answer is yes, we will submit it if it's a valid and appropriate place to do so. But if they have a hearing coming up, we will just include that in the information going forward.
And as to follow up what Chief Honey said, again, if it's a qualifying program, there's an automatic process that takes place. Cap is closed, completion is entered, it comes over to the board. It goes to the release entry first and then it comes to the board. If it's say a third or something, then there's again that discretionary process that the board can look at. And through our rules, not only can corrections provide that information to us in a special attention, but the individual can also write. And if we get it, then we can review the circumstances and determine whether they qualify for an earlier hearing, or.
And it is a case by case basis. And we love to see that when you have people completing programs and they're doing excellent. Of course, we want to see that. But there are other considerations that drive decisions as well, including victim impact and concerns. And so those sort of issues. So that's why there's so much tension in this system with different interests pulling. Different interests want different outcomes, right? And so it's difficult to make those decisions, but that's always going to be a case by case decision, and we'll get those special attentions, whether from the individual or UDC, and we will consider it, but we have to consider other things, including the sentence, victim's interest, and other institutional behaviors, so.
Prior to becoming a board member, I had many involvement with family members, with letters from individuals. And one thing I consistently said is, if something is submitted to the board, I can't guarantee you what the outcome's gonna be. The one thing I can guarantee you, if nobody asks, the answer is no. It's never gonna be considered. So we have a saying at the board, when in doubt, route to the board. When in doubt, send it on. And it'll be reviewed by our staff and determined if they may qualify for an early hearing or any of those things.
Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation, super helpful. I had a question about how a program becomes approved to be recognized as worthy of a time cut.
That's a great question.
So they all get submitted through the R&R Reentry and Rehabilitation Division. And then we submit it to the Board of Pardons and we collaborate on, is this something that is valid? And it really comes down to, we look at the criteria, the curriculum, the number of hours being put in. Obviously, we want them to be comparable. So if somebody gets a degree with Salt Lake Community College, 126 hours, wherever it is, but then we have another curriculum that only takes 20 hours, they're not comparable. We're gonna have everyone flooding over there. We want them to be comparable and efficient and something that's going to lead to their success. So if you have something like that, let's be in contact and we can definitely push that forward.
Fantastic, yeah, so we're about a year and a half away from our first cohort graduating, and so with a bachelor's degree, and would love for there to be an additional incentive, or to at least go through the process to determine what that would look like.
Yeah, get that info to the
And
board.
and one thing I just clarified with Brett here is this is on the Board of Pardons website. But just for everyone's information, from January first until quarter one of FY 26 is so September. So January 1st till now, there's been over 45,000 incarcerated days cut. That includes mandatory and discretionary. I mean, over 45,000, that's a lot. And that's just increasing just because we're getting better and more efficient about making sure everyone gets the total time they can. So,
Just a follow-up, so with an education time cut, if someone earns a high school degree and then earns an associate degree through SLIC and then earns a bachelor's degree through the University of Utah, do those days add up together? Or
you only can get 2 4-month time cuts per person.
Well, that are mandatory.
That are mandatory, yes. 2 mandatory ones.
But then there are also discretionary. So again, that would be a special attention that could be sent to the board to consider a third class or program or the bachelor's.
So
And it just
yeah.
depends on case action plan, their other, what else they've been doing, their commitment offenses, all those.
So if they received a mandatory for high school and then a mandatory for like an associate's, when it came to the bachelor's, we would submit a special attention, letting them know, saying, hey, they've already received this. This would be a discretionary at the board's discretion.
And I think the point of asking these questions is really if the educators can help incentivize the completion and help incentivize this learning opportunity. We know that especially the completion of these programs reduce their chance substantially to come back into the system, right? So reducing recidivism, this is the place, right, to do that. And so I think the more they understand, I don't know if there's a one pager that can be, first day class, we're so excited you're here. And this is, what are the incentives that we're helping to provide as you go through this process, whatever you can do for them, I think, and in communicating that with the students, I think is awesome.
Yeah, and we just came up with an offender handbook.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna mention. I think there's
You want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so, I mean, it was a long time coming. We worked through some different groups, but we just recently just published and distributed a handbook for the individuals. I think there's a section in the handbook that talks about the time cuts and credits and different things. So that might be a good spot early on. That they'll see that information. It's available on the tablets. It's in a printed form. So we got a couple of different methods of how we can get that to individuals. And I think it's also available on our website. Mistaken, so.
Could you provide us with a copy of that handbook? Because you're right, we get inundated with questions about how it works, and I kind of have a basic understanding, but there's so much that, because it is a complicated system. And I was going to ask, Representative Ballard, didn't we a couple of years ago help and work with the legislature to put into code that an associate's degree specifically from Salt Lake Community College at that point and a bachelor's from the U of U would lead to that mandatory time cut?
I know that we put in HB 194 that for corrections to really be clear about incentives and start providing more incentives. So I think with the board here, I think that's a good question to make sure that there's clarity, whether it's that specific or something else. I think that's the purpose of this conversation and asking them to present. So I just want to mention one thing, and then we need to turn the time for a moment over to Senator McKell because he has only just a few minutes left. But I just came from a great presentation by the courts, APMP corrections at the Capitol boardroom at the Capitol regarding all of this, this reentry and what the process is. And I think something that I've identified that I loved, that I mentioned to a number of people there, that I also wanted to mention here is there's a new program called Recidiviz that really collaborates data for UDC on how to prevent recidivism. And they're open for what data really is important. And I wanted to pose this, that we can have a further discussion at another time. But really having the alignment with the reentry division and AP&P and the community justice councils to include the 5 really top data points that we're trying to articulate. And I got these 5 things off of the presentation today saying that the parole officers are in charge of helping with the following. And I think what we're doing with all these entities, and it includes employment and education, housing, medical, and treatment/counseling. And so the education component is what I wanted to bring up with this right here. I think for reentry, with parole, with reenter, I want to help that seamless process for them to register for classes on the outside, for those institutions to be supportive in every way, and have the community justice councils help facilitate any of these things. I'd love to have a follow-up conversation, because I think that's the opportunity that we have to actually track that data of in parole. Because we have an indeterminate sentencing, really we have the statistic that AP&P gave me was 87% of all inmates rely on a successful parole to get out of the system. So if we can actually measure those things that help them to be successful, I think we can identify the continuity of the education, the efficacy of the completion while in corrections directly to that career. I'd like to help align that. So we do need to just pause for a minute, and Senator McKell, I would love to have you take just a minute, because last week in our appropriations committee for criminal justice, we did make a motion to have a separate line item for UDC to have a base budget line item specifically for higher education. And that is what this council has discussed since its inception. But you, Senator McKell, have really the ability to help to make this happen as I'm putting the directive to USHE and also to corrections to be really put that on paper and on a specific ask of wherever this budget's come from, to be a specific accountability line item. What is your hope, and what do you see the opportunity for the next few months for this line item? What would you like to see come of it?
So my audio is okay, right?
Yes.
Okay, so during the interim, you told me you were doing that, and I think there's a ton of wisdom to what Chair Ballard did. Creating a line item is appropriate, and it keeps it out there in the crosshairs, so we see it, and it highlights how important it is. So during the interim, I pinned down Jonathan Ball. He's our fiscal analyst, and Jonathan Ball, what I did is I asked him specifically to provide me with options of where to get that funding. So in November, during November interim meetings, I am going to follow up with Jonathan. He's promised to get me a couple proposals, and it may be as simple as just going after general funds to do it. But he had a few ideas, but he said, let me sharpen my pencil, let me look through the budget, and let me come back with proposals. I do think we need an ongoing funding source, and if we just have to put it in the general budget, that's what we should do. But Jonathan is brilliant, and he's going to work on it. But I do appreciate Chair Ballard. I do, creating that line item is very appropriate. It's extremely helpful. As you talk about this issue in your areas, I think there's a lot of appetite to work on just a general fund item, an ongoing funding item. Senator Weiler reached out. He wants to be part of it as well. He's up in Chair Ballard's area. I think there's a lot of appetite for the legislature, but I'll have a better follow-up. I did reach out to Jonathan Ball. He's our funding genius in the legislature. He's going to get me 2 or 3 proposals of where he thinks we can draw the money. He had some ideas off the top of his head. I don't want to share those yet because I want him to vet those ideas, but that conversation has been started. And Chair Ballard, I think your line item just makes it that much easier, but we do need to find a funding source. And it might be one where we just again ask for general funds, our budget, we thought we were down, then we thought we had a surplus. It looks like we're going to be flat. We've got a bunch of money coming through the Trump administration for rural, healthcare. I thought for sure I could pick off some of that, and Jonathan Ball thought, let's find something different. And but he's going to work on it, and we'll find something. So that's my report. And sorry I couldn't be here today.
No worries. I appreciate you giving that update because continuing in our meeting today, we do have a discussion that I would like to make sure that we have all of the institutions and any higher education, including Ensign College, to really bring everything to the table so that our numbers are accurate, our planning for the future and for growth and for positions that are needed are also included in that, so that we don't have to rob Peter to pay Paul every time we turn around. And so appreciate DC to this point, really figuring out how to do that. And so we are here to support you is what we want you to know.
And let's not shy away from it. I mean, what all of you are doing in the room today really matters, and you've got a really good story to tell between all of the institutions. And I appreciated the presentation from Ensign College. I think you fill a unique role. But let's tell the story and make sure our colleagues across the legislature know what's happening. But let's not shy away for asking for money. There's no question that the return we get is significant.
Can we briefly talk maybe about timeline? Because if you all are leading out on this effort, I think we definitely want to loop in our CFO. And I know that institutions probably want to loop in their CFOs as well to the conversation as we look at not only what it takes to currently sustain what we have going, but what are the growth funding as well. So what are we talking about as far as time, and then how do we collaborate on moving that?
When do you want that, Senator McKell? When do you want the final numbers?
I want final numbers by December if I can, going into the session. So Jonathan's going to work on a funding source for me to look at. And I mean, the concern for me is I look at this phone line that we have, and we're getting the money, we're not getting the money, we're getting the money, and we can't do this whiplash back and forth. It just doesn't make any sense. So we just need a steady funding source, and let's in that line item and just get it all dialed in.
So Taylor,
December.
sorry. Oh, I was just saying, the good thing is we just redid all of our contracts, which has a 5-year growth plan in all of those. So we already have all those numbers figured out, and then we will be able to get those numbers quickly.
Big. And I do need to jump off, unfortunately. I've got a hard stop, and in fact, my group they just called me, so I've got to jump off, and I apologize. Thank you for fitting me in.
Yep. Thank you, Chair McKell. Sure appreciate it.
So it sounds like we have the information. So do you want to review? I don't know when it'll.
I just need to get with my financial team to make sure that because they gave me a number last week, and then I just want to make sure that that's correct coming back. And then I should get to you in the next week.
And I think it's important, since that's for the existing contracts and what you have moving forward, to double check with the institutions. Is this the model that do we need to make any tweaks or adjustments? And then I would like to know within that, what's the role of a virtual growth of access that we want to plan for? Because right now we are definitely on an in-person model. And even for virtual access, regardless of housing location or isolation or whatever it may be, I think I want to put a component in there that is anticipating where we're going, right? And that virtual option, we have to have the professors to manage it and to oversee it. Is there some kind of future technology? I know we've got some donations that are going through, but do we have what we need for the cushion for technology growth or virtual options, or both in the 2 correctional facilities or just the 1, or how it expands to jails? I think that should be part of our growth model that we give initially. Otherwise, I think it's a lot harder to come back when in a year we're ready to expand that and now we have to come up with a new narrative for it, right? So do you have any, maybe as I turn to the institutions, do you have any suggestions of how to factor that into our financial proposal?
Real quick, I'm gonna give you a new timeline, just because Kelsey here starts on November 3rd. So if I can just I'll get it to you by November 15th, if that's okay, just so, because I want her to be a part of this.
Well, and I don't actually think, I was just offering our
No,
chief
that's
financial
what I'm
officer
saying,
announce
yeah.
public, so Nate can volunteer me for something at another time, but I don't know if he necessarily has to be involved if it's gone through the financial rounds at institutions. Nate certainly doesn't have to be involved. I just wanted to offer him up this, help if you were navigating the
Well,
process, but
Yeah,
it sounds like you've done a great job.
well, and that's what's good about the contracts is they run it through all of their CFOs
Yeah.
at a time, and so.
Yeah, so I don't think we necessarily have to be involved, but I think we'd love a review here with our chairs.
And I think that's the benefit of having Nate actually do a review is to say, oh, there might be some other components you haven't thought of or considered if you're really putting this in as a base budget. So do you have any other thoughts as I turn to the institutions? Yeah.
So at Snow, we are right now teaching our second pilot course by IVC to 2 of the county jails in our area. We have already submitted the paperwork for Northwestern to accredit this as part of our prison education program. And we have 3 other jails who are very interested. The IVC, these are our direct video courses, they're synchronous. We have found that we have to combine jails to do this because say the San Pete jail only has room for 10 people in their IVC room. So we're teaching 10 people in San Pete and 10 people in Emery County right now. We are looking for a funding source to hire a director. There won't be a lot of other costs because we have the IVC units set up for concurrent enrollment classes. It's the same technology. So with a fairly minimal investment, we are prepared to string together as many jails as we possibly can because the critical mass that comes with having lots of people there makes those courses viable. It's very difficult to justify a course for 10 people. But if we have 30 people in 3 different jails, it becomes much more cost effective for us to do that. So that is, that's an option we are aggressively pursuing and would love to find a funding source for somebody who could just full time, because there's a lot of technology issues and a lot of scheduling issues. So we need some funding source for a director to make, we could scale this as much as the state would like to scale this.
And
I
thank
think
you for
that's my
leading
point,
out
right?
on that, Mike. That is so wonderful. Are those students then accessing Pell? Is that?
They are not, we are scholarshiping all of those students until we get them added to our PEP. So right now, we are bearing the full cost of their tuition. But we hope, we are fairly sure that by the end of this semester, we will have the permission from Northwest to add this to our PEP, and then they become Pell eligible.
Yeah, because it's so important and it's so much work to be able to facilitate that Pell access to the going in and correcting documents that are sent back by the Department of Ed and then going to these jails. It's going to require that type of director and full-time support for sure.
So I think that's why I'm bringing this up, right? I think what the contracts are today or for today, and I'm always looking into where we're headed. And we have a few thousand inmates that are contracted out into the jails that are state inmates that also want access, whether it's virtually or in person, like Snow was talking about. So and maybe these are some things that we can continue to discuss. I guess one model that I've seen used other places is to have built into the funding stream, like a grant process that that we've got some money that adds to the base budget every year for the growth, but that is a way as new opportunities come up that whether it's this council, whether it's with the executive team, whatever it is, that is considering that an institution applying to say, we're ready for some growth, is that something that model, that this fund could give as, and grant to them, right? Just because there will be future needs as we expand. And so that's one idea that I have, that could be given as expansions go through. Are there any thoughts to that or recommendations? Yeah, Andy.
The idea of having a pool of resources that would be available for growth for institutions, whether under contract or not under contract, I think makes sense. For example, the University of Utah, we have a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Corrections. We don't have any sort of financial contract with the Department of Corrections to support the bachelor's degree program or the student center that we run inside. We are, as I've heard every HECC meeting, we're always looking to be able to sustain our program and to build and grow. And so I think that idea of having either I like the idea of having additional resources that could be made available, or as you're developing this kind of line item idea with the state.
And I think that's where I talk about maybe an executive opportunity for a proposal, because if you look at UC institutions, as we've moved forward, it's the board that helps to determine what the role and the function of all the institutions are and where programs should be expanded instead of everybody trying to copy and paste, and repeat everything. I think a model of some kind of, I don't know if a grant, I don't know, you guys are better at it, I think, than me, or if Taylor has any thoughts about that we can help facilitate with UDC that process of expanding the right programs in the right places, or even putting in place to say, we love that. Can your institution, or can you find some NGOs or whatever, to help to partner with, so it's not just, oh, good, everybody, let's pick me for new funding, right? I think if there's a process, I don't know, Taylor, if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think we do certainly need to figure out a process, because it seems like right now that the UDC contracts process isn't, I'm just gonna use the word representative of the full scope of services and educational services that we offer. And it's not designed to be right, but I do think we want to consider, then are there additional dollars? And in the last meeting, we talked about developing kind of a multi-source, sustainable model for funding that I think should come. I just don't know if by December that we could develop what that multi-source funding looks like. I think that we could look at the growth plus the 5-year, or the sustained plus 5-year growth, and add in maybe the U or other I don't really want to add in a ton of other institutions. I don't know if you've had contact with other institutions, I guess is what I'm wondering, because we talk about this, it seems like very regularly in our meetings, that sometimes there are other institutions that are offering things, but maybe aren't represented here. And so I think we should develop something that looks at a multi-source funding, but I do wonder if for December, it's not that we specifically are acknowledging like an existing plus a little bit of growth and encompassing the U.
Yeah, because if Gunnison comes back and says, we have X number of inmates who are ready for higher ed, how can you help us? We want to be able to facilitate, instead of going, I'm so sorry, we just don't have a model for that. I want to be able to help have that ready to go for that application, so to speak, to say, yeah, we're ready to help you in Gunnison for the second correctional facility of the state to really offer some other higher ed options, right? Because I think right now there's not any, it's mostly GEDs and.
There's no college.
Well, no, we're
No
offering 8 courses this
8
semester.
courses, so 8
Yeah,
courses
full
are in
associate
there.
degree.
Yeah, so I mean, but that's what
Oh,
I'm
and it's in
saying.
colleges there, sorry, thank you.
Yeah, so whatever, but that wasn't the case a few years ago, so I'm just kind of saying, how do
No,
we
it's
help
definitely-
support you is what I wanted
No,
to
it's
know.
definitely, we want to keep expanding, and especially we want to make it, part of our big challenge is our primary, well, not primary, one of our primary focuses is housing. End of story. We have to house offenders. We can't house everybody in Salt Lake where the majority of the resources are. And so they have to go down to Gunnison, and then we also have to house them in our county jails. And so how do we advocate for everyone in the county jails, down in Gunnison, everywhere to have the same resources. We only house female offenders in Salt Lake or in 2 of our county jails. And so we want to be able to offer that everywhere, but then it comes down to space and technology and funding for all of this. So yes, we are open to always solving for yes. And so just thank you for this. I think this is a good push.
And you do what you do best with UDC. That's why I think this is the key for helping you do the educational planning side of it and funding side of it, that we can make it easier for you,
Correct.
right? So that you're focusing on what your primary role is, and we can focus on expanding the educational opportunities.
Correct. And I think there is a definite need and a want and an appetite for higher education among the offenders. They want
Yeah,
more.
they do.
And just to make it easier, like going back to David, it is hard to navigate through them all. And I was just speaking to Kelsey about this. That's a main part of her role, is to design systems to help that. And I think we're getting a lot better than we have been.
So I think
So always.
utilizing your CFO, Nate, I think is really important as we have this first opportunity with the base budget, because if they're talking about maybe even finding separate funds than what exists right now in UDC, and if that's the case, let's use both, right?
Right.
That's why I'm like, this is our chance to really plan for where we should be going, instead of looking at today's page. I'm looking at both of those going, how can this is an incredible opportunity for all of our state inmates, and how to access that in the jails and expand. I'm always looking at the bigger picture off of just today's report.
Well, and I think, and I appreciate Andy bringing this up, is because Andy's exactly right. They're able to they're always looking for new sources of income, but what if something stops and they're unable to? Like, they provide a great service. We want to continue that. So if we can figure out what we can do on our level to help those institutions, it's something we should look at.
And then I had a quick question. It was, because it seems like it really is an impossible task to create, I know this is a swear word, sorry, equity. Amongst the different locations where UDC is forced to place inmates. So I'm wondering if maybe our approach would be would it be possible to just, since the U of U, for example, is established up here in this area, that someone could put in for a transfer and then make it easily accessible to come into our institution here, so that they could go to the U. Or if they wanted specific types of technical training that was offered down at Bryson Oak College, then we could then transfer people around to where the different entities are set up. If we had a county jail, like up at Summit, for example, I thought if we had that as a center for college education, and then we could take people in the jails and put them there that wanted to go to that. Would it be possible for UDC to take that approach? Because giving everything at every institution seems impossible.
Well, you're absolutely right. It is impossible. The one hard part we always face with housing offenders is they're not always created equal. And when I talk about that, we have security levels, we have medical levels.
Yeah.
If somebody has an acute medical condition, we have to keep them up closer to where we have more medical resources. It's kind of hard to send somebody all the way out to Uinta Basin, where if they have an acute medical issue. So we do run into challenges like that. And like I talked about the female offenders, there's so many limited spaces we can go just because it's a smaller population. And then even the jails, they all have their own, I won't say expertise, but some, like, okay, Beaver County Jail, they teach drug offense, substance use down there. And Kane County teaches sex offense treatment. So we have different populations everywhere. We have people with safety concerns. We have people with gang issues. So it's more than just where we can locate them. There's a lot of different factors going in this, but that's our problem to solve. As long as we can figure out how we can provide the most possible with technology. We recently got a federal grant for smart boards. they're called meat boards. And it's basically a huge TV that you can broadcast along, just like you were talking about. And that's how we can do a lot with technology, I think.
So probably the biggest impediment to growing our program out there we have right now is not our resources, it's their space. We will go, we're at 80 students right now, we're gonna go to 120 next fall. That's as much as we can grow because that will be 12 courses and that's 3 courses every night from Monday through Thursday. That maxes out Gunnison's resources, space resources that are in times that they don't already have scheduled. So that is another, we are willing to grow the program substantially more than it is right now, but we don't have the space to do that.
I think that's why I'm looking at virtually, like how can we expand the virtual option?
But even virtually, you need space. They have to be somewhere.
Well,
So-
I mean, there's online courses and classes, if there's access to the tablets or computers,
And that's
during
where,
downtime, I mean, that's what I'm referring to, all the above, not just, I need to be I need to see my Skype class going on, right?
and that's exactly what we're looking at. I mean, Dan and I are working on something for our maximum security inmates, where it is, you learn at your own pace.
Yeah.
You just come down to a computer lab. And now it's very limited, but it's still something. And so I agree, space is always a limitation. We had a meeting with everyone in this room and that was a big thing, is space and time. That is a constraint we deal with on a constant basis, because then we have a whole bunch of volunteer groups that want to come in. And so we're looking at doing night and weekend and as many classes as we can do, we're gonna go in there, so.
So I think those are really important conversations. I do want to say for the first time, when you talk about housing, this program recidivism is really what has helped UDC to start looking at where the housing is and why, right? So I think as they get better at asking recidivists to put in certain identifying factors, it will make it better for them to identify where people want to be or could be. But that, I'm looking upstream to think, where do you figure that out? You figure that out upon entry. Do you need to change your career? What options do you want to start considering? And that's where the opportunity should be stemming from, rather than 3/4 of the way through their time under corrections, right? So I appreciate that UDC is working way upstream now at this point for that reentry. It's not a perfect process, yes, but that's where I think our student access advisors are the key to being able to help them talk about those specific pathways. So the more we can identify, not just here's the pathway at this location, but what virtual pathways do we have that we can offer if they are offsite, if they are in, high security areas, what are those options? And that's where I put it back to you to say, we need you and your institutions to come forward with those ideas. Otherwise, we don't know how to fund that or fund that growth or fund, is it, that if we need more technology donated or facilitated, or I don't know, right? We need those specifics. And I think that's why I always go to what are the barriers and what are the opportunities? Where do we want to expand this?
So one more and then I'll be quiet.
Yeah, no, we need it.
It is not, in our opinion, possible or feasible to run courses on the tablets if those courses require writing, because there's no functional way to get more than a half a sentence typed in on the tablets. We purchased 150 laptops and 10 servers for the Gunnison facility. But they're not allowed to use those except in dedicated computer labs.
Yeah.
So that's a rule situation. If they were able to use the laptops, because we will put the servers there, these are prison designed laptops, we would be able to teach asynchronous classes there. But as long as it's all on the tablet, that's really not feasible.
Well,
David, would you
and
agree with
that's,
that?
so we are working on that. I just met with Ensign College last week about this exact issue. We do have a plan, but it has to be in a monitored, controlled environment. And that's really the key part of this. If they have access to the outside, going back to what the board of department says, we have to keep in mind the victims of.
We don't need them
everybody.
to have access to the outside. We have proprietary servers in there that we can run these courses from.
Right.
They just need to be able to access.
Like how
those.
many, like, and that's where we need to figure out, is like, all right, how many hours a day would this need to be? How many hours a week type thing? Because if we could create a system where it's monitored by one staff and in one area, if you start allowing them to go into the sections, that's where we start having a lot of issues. And that's our security side of things that we have to look at.
Yeah, because my ideal would be being able to have access to my own computer at various times during the day that is not connected to the internet, but that I can upload information at certain, weekly points. And I can download information onto my computer at certain weekly points. It's not constant access to the internet. And so,
We do have that technology in place.
yeah, so that's what
We can
I'm,
upload and download and we
Yeah.
can collect the information and
And
then
then
no
at night it
access.
uploads it to server, right?
No, it has to be attached to a proprietary docking station
I got you.
that we bring in.
so it's not just open, it has to physically go, okay, now we're gonna upload and download. Now you can take it back to your cell and work as much as you want on the video that's there and your homework and whatever that's
I think
already on the
I
unit.
will say this, obviously corrections always evolves. And where we were at 2 years ago, we wouldn't even be having this conversation because it would be an absolute no, we're not even allowing that to happen. But we're past that now. In fact, we have a security plan for laptops. I think we have a meeting with you next 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
Okay, in 2 weeks, when we'll come down, I'll bring Kelsey down and we'll talk about this very thing. But that's just it. We should be able to create these areas where we'll give them enough time. We just need to figure out how much time that's going to be and how much access they can have to us.
And I think it would be awesome with that in mind, that you could have your own computer, laptop, to do your homework at various times during the day, that I can see certain areas of a housing unit that during the day is designated, for people who are sitting and wanting to be on their computer and in that quiet space, and then they can go back into other areas, right? Or even some of the areas that have more freedom, that they're always out, even in the public, a table that whoever wants to sit around and work on their computer and do homework are doing that together. And so I think the more that becomes, hey, what are they doing? I want to start using my time better. I want to be in that class. I want my own laptop to start getting on those classes. I think that's where the synergy starts to come, for the opportunity for the inmates to use their time in some other way because they have the time, right?
And the legislation that we did pass on this places the responsibility for technology access and education specifically on UDC. And so, and I think that's where it should be because of the security challenges and problems. So I think, Mike, that our programs should hand all of that over to UDC, and that UDC, in accordance with what is now state law, should be the facilitators of that education and that technology access. But just one quick point of not just the papers that can be written on a laptop, but one of our major expenses for our program is our textbooks, because textbooks are very, very expensive, as we all know. So if we can get, PDF copies or things like that we can upload onto the laptops, it's going to reduce the amount of cost that we have to pay for books and replace books and keep track of those. I think it'll actually help security in the long run.
And the least amount of things we can have going in and out that's the way to do it. So I agree with you. And that's why we're kind of running this test pilot of having laptops donated to us. Our technology team is going to revamp them, and then we'll just keep them on the upkeep and keep them going, and then make sure everything that we need on there as far as educational platform is going to be put on there. So that's what we're working towards this, because you brought this up before, and it is huge. We can't have things going in and out, in and out, in and out. If we can keep it there, keep it up and going, that's the right thing.
And thank you. And I agree with you. When the new facility was opened, we were told there was no way that they would ever have access to laptops. And we had all of these, and we were told no way. And then it's little by little. So thank you so much. We're in a great place right now, and I think we'll just build on
And
it.
I think, and don't get me wrong when I say this, we're nowhere close to being finished. Like, we want to keep progressing. So we have a lot of work to do, but I am encouraged by the way we're going. It does. What happens is we try something new. They figure out how to manipulate that new system. And so we have to step back and redo the security and then move forward knowing more. And we've had to do that with the tablets. I mean, they still know how to manipulate the tablets. And so we're working on that, but that's our job and that's what we're committed to do. So.
Thank you.
Isn't that awesome? I'm just sitting here going, 2 years ago, we wouldn't be talking about this and so this is what the point of this council is to identify the barriers, but also how can we rethink this every single time? And so, again, I feel like the priority in the next few weeks, because we won't be meeting again until January, is to figure out what funding do we want to ask for that accounts for future classes that can be done on their own time as they go on these personal laptops that are only isolated to where they are. Doesn't need to be freely on the internet. So
I will say this, if you build me another $1 billion facility right next to the Solid.
Sounds like we have our funding.
Just saying.
They've got that big empty warehouse. Can't we figure out what to do?
It's not empty.
It says there's available space. There's a big sign. That's that last time I drove past.
Oh, the big one. Oh, that's not UDC.
I know. Can we make it UDC? There's available space, right?
Yeah, if that person built it, I'm sure they'll lease it to us for sure.
Yeah.
They waited for the state to put it on the infrastructure and built it.
Yeah, of course, right? But there is availability.
Correct. You're absolutely.
Thank you. And just one last very brief point. As exciting and wonderful as it is to have remote education and these distant learning opportunities increase, I hope that we will, as a council, keep in mind, the studies that have been done have been very, very specific that the most transformative educational experience that someone can have while incarcerated is face-to-face learning. And so it's just the superior way to offer education. So it's not always feasible and we have to go this way. I'm excited, but I hope we'll remember the importance of that human connection that is so essential, especially in this environment.
And that's a great tribute to you as the education professors and educators, because you were the ones that look them in the eye and have confidence in their abilities and help them to establish that within themselves. So thank you so much. Let's look at the agenda just for a moment. I'm going to turn over to Richard to do some summary and some of what we're up to next.
So can I also say that, and if it's okay with you, Chair, I think we can get rid of the recommendations discussion and instead, based on our conversation here today, we actually have a list of about 10 recommendations throughout this year's council meetings that you all recommended that we always build into the annual report. So instead of going one by one through them each year, what we can do is send those out in email for review, and that way we don't have to have even more robust discussions. You all have already discussed them and sometimes multiple times. So I think we just add those to the report and summary and skip it for today. If that's okay.
Sure.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. So let's talk about data capturing. And we know that we have, some of you might remember the template that we use, this particular template that has been used to collect enrollment numbers and so on that feeds onto the annual report, right? Now, I recently learned that UDC has this post-secondary education partner, KPI Google spreadsheet that collects monthly data. And this includes the data that we have been trying to gather, which is withdrawals, attendance, and so on. The question really here is, what data do we need and how often? We met after the last meeting to discuss Qualtrics. We met to discuss Qualtrics, how can we collect that data. Now, that we know about this post-secondary partner KPI. One of the items that is missing on this, though, is the reasons for withdrawals. And that was one of the items that was brought up at the last meeting. And why are we having students stopping out? So in essence, in short, the question here is, what data do we need? How do we want it? And how often do we want it? Because the idea has been is we need that more recent data, monthly data, so we can report on it between the meetings, analyze it that way, and that way we come to these meetings and not necessarily to be reporting on those numbers, rather in spending that time to discuss and get that fruitful solutions.
Yeah, so I think we're, in the middle of these conversations right now and really thinking through from our last meeting that we had, the call was given to Richard to establish a monthly standardized reporting. And in that is when he discovered that OUDC already asks our institutions to report information on a more regular basis. And I think as we explored the option for monthly reporting too, we did run into, a little bit of challenges with our institutions who don't do things on a monthly basis, who do things on a semester, quarter, or different types of bases. And so I think we were wondering, and for discussion today is what is the value of data? And it's really to be able to have informed discussions and take informed action related to our recommendations or our priorities in these meetings. But what does that look like? And what information do we really need to capture? And can we capture that would look different on a month-by-month basis? And so I think we just wanted to open the discussion up today to really get an idea of what we're talking about so that in the coming year, we can set forth a procedure for how we go about data collection and why.
So I guess I can start. So per the contracts that we just signed, we collect data on a monthly basis. Usually what happens is by the 10th of every month, we collect the month prior. We give them, a few days to collect. Now, in the past, this has been sparse. We haven't really put a high priority, but internally with our education team, this is going to be a high priority. In fact, I had a meeting this morning and we have in our contract a quarterly meeting where we discuss our KPIs. And I'll just kind of list with you what our KPIs. Now, these aren't mandatory. These are some of the things, this is more of a may provide rather than a shall, because every school tracks things differently. However, we want to start tracking more consistently. So the key performance indicators, these may include growth as measured by pre and post testing. So we want to know, are they actually getting better with their pre and post testing? Competency or proficiency assessments, rubric-based evaluations, attendance rates, course completion or graduation rates, and offender job attainment after prison release. That one's a tough one. Just after prison release, it's hard to track everybody after. And that's what I've been in discussion with a lot of people in this room on how we can do that, and we'll get there. But those are some of the KPIs we are going to start tracking internally. The enrollment we track, we will get monthly no matter what. So that's easy to figure out. And Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe if we unenroll them, we have to list a reason why. Correct. It's easier. It's usually as simple as no fault of the offender, i.e. he paroled, right? If he paroled, he can't finish. So it wasn't a fault of his, he just paroled. Fault of offender, which means they probably got a disciplinary issue, administratively removed. And then I think there's one more why we list that. So we can provide that data as well.
So it feels like maybe the action here is that Richard and Kelsey, I don't know, Kelsey, welcome to this meeting where you're being volunteered.
Actually, this is super.
But is this where we say that you all work together, figure out how we get that and if we can distribute to HEC to then make, more informed conversations about what's going on? Because I think that's a very thorough list, unless anyone would like to add something maybe to that.
Well, and that's where, so again, these quarterly meetings we haven't started with, and just so, we have contracts with like UBTech, Snow, and Davis. but we have MOUs with Salt Lake. So we still want to collect data because we want to know how we're doing. We want to know how many people are enrolled, how many people, right? Ensign College, they just presented today on some great numbers. We want to actually showcase the good we are doing because to Representative Ballard's point, I don't think a lot of people know. So I think we should represent what the good we're doing so we can ask for more help and show that actually we're getting a return on our investment. Hey, we want you to invest in these offenders and we're getting a return on that. So yes, I think we can definitely coordinate of exactly how we report this. We have a bi-weekly meeting, Richard and I and Kelsey will be on that, and we can definitely get those numbers. I just want to make sure that I go through my communications team to make sure we get the right numbers out so they're aware of how we're communicating that. So I just want to make sure the right format before I tell you exactly.
Yeah, and to be quite honest, we're doing our annual reporting based on the Excel file that you all sent us. So I think that this could be something that we start in the next cycle of meetings as we look to schedule those. We can get on a more regular cadence so that we have that information leading up to the quarterly meetings that we all have as heck.
Okay.
Because what I would like to see out of that information is how do we drive our pathways? How do we drive our graduation goals with the jobs and the workforce? How can we help in making this more impactful? As we're looking at virtual options and expanding to jails or whatever it may be, I think that's what USHE is great at doing. So in getting that information, does anybody have any other suggestions of other data that might be helpful in making this more successful or help to identify where we can be better at looking to the future? Do you have any suggestions? What you currently report?
Well, and I will say this, of all of that I just listed, that's in collaboration with everyone basically in this room. We've kind of gone around and talked about what are some of the things we could be gathering and tracking, but there is, people track things differently, but we just want to be a little bit more consistent and the same way we track it with everybody's.
Just, with our MOUs and our contracts that our institutions have with UDC, we have a data sharing agreement in place that allows us to provide that information and share back and forth between our institutions. However, FERPA prevents us from giving that information to each other. And I'm not sure the details legally, but I wonder, it's something we should probably look at.
Yeah, we have a privacy officer, so we'd be happy to run the information by our privacy officer. I don't anticipate, just because it's not identifiable, although who knows, maybe, and they will tell me because this is what they do. Like if someone could then like narrow it down and know who the students are, but we could run it through our privacy officer who thinks, eats, sleeps and breathes FERPA.
And that would be great, because that also is, we put in our contracts and then we use it, we want to follow that. We used to have really good legal counsel, he decided to leave, now we don't.
And my next step is I've actually now been appointed to a new board that is, I think it's Talent Ready Workforce Development for the state. And so I want to be able to take what we're doing and say, how can we help them get those jobs? Right? So that's why I need like the actual pathways, completions, how we need to adjust that according to what the workforce needs are. I want to be able to help collaborate that next year as I start on that commission. But I think the more, if that can be shared here and they can help with me, then I can help work on actually getting those jobs and helping the reentry division to know, hey, here's where we can start funneling those jobs. So that's what I want to be able to help with as well. So awesome. Do you have anything else you want? Okay, we're now, we've talked about a lot of these great things that have that we're now doing. We have our very last item, which is the institutional updates. And so I think we have just a minute. I'm just gonna open it up and tell us whatever you want to tell us at this point with where the discussions we've had, what you'd like to see, or what you want to highlight. Well, let's go around this way. I think we'll start with Stowe College. You've been telling us some things, but then we'll go to Dan next.
So most of what I have report, I've already managed to leak out into the conversation. We currently have 80 students. We're moving to 120 students in the fall. That will be maximum capacity for us at the time. All of these classes are taught by tenure track faculty as part of their teaching load. And this was intentional. With the reallocation. We eliminated a general education course and reallocated part of those funds through faculty teaching time to the PRISM. You've heard about our IVC pilot, and that's something we would love to scale, and are working through the accreditation, Pell Grant, all of the other implications as a way to scale that. The last thing, which I haven't brought up, which I do want to throw out here, CUCF, the inmates really want a 4-year option. We had been working with Lori Sharp at UVU for you to come in and do that. Lori just accepted a presidency in Texas, so we will kind of be going back to square one there. But we are, just so that the universe knows it, we are very interested in a 4-year school partner to come in and work with us to create a 4-year extension to the 2-year degree that we're offering. Without exception, every one of our students would like to pursue that.
So that's the to-do list as we're looking at the growth. Thank you so much, Dan.
I'll be brief so everyone has an opportunity. Again, our maximum security program is going to roll out next month. I think we're on target. I actually just received the email while we were sitting here today from Gene Haas, who's a manufacturer of CNC equipment, that we are one of now 2 certification sites in the entire state. So no other prison in the US is offering those Haas certifications. So that's pretty exciting. In addition to that, we're also rolling out our scholarship program. So students will begin attending, assuming that you graduate at no cost. So they will pay an initial $50 to enroll. And our foundation will return that money to them upon graduation. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andy.
Congrats on getting that work done and maximum security. That's I'm sure a huge lift, and folks there must be really excited.
Been hard.
It's incredible. So a few things we've been working on. Our degree program, the bachelor's degree, is chugging along. It's the first time we've been able to offer 3 courses in 1 semester. Moving forward, we'll be doing 3 courses for the next year and a half, and we'll have our first graduation, which is exciting. We still have 100% retention rate of our students, save 2 students who were released. Our work with the student center is going really well. In the women's designated unit, we have approximately 50% of individuals in the women's unit have come into contact with the student center, whether about 130 or 140 have gone into the center for tutoring. Other folks have engaged in some of our extracurricular humanities-based programming. We are expanding the number of hours we're offering through the student center. Right now, we're offering 7 hours a week on Mondays and Tuesdays. We're going to pilot Saturday evenings. So let's see how that goes. That'll get to 10 hours a week. And we'll see if there's demand for it. We've heard from a number of people they can't come from the 1 to 4:30 hours because they are at work. And so this will provide folks who are working an opportunity to come down in the evenings and work with education advocates. We heard on Monday that a grant that we applied for came through, which will allow us to kind of move past the pilot phase of the student center. It gives us funding for 3 years to cover the cost of wages for incarcerated education advocates and some staffing. So that's exciting that we can kind of say with certainty that we have funding in place for 3 years and on the women's side for the student center. We're also working on 2 rather large grants with foundations that aren't so much interested in us expanding our work on site in Utah, but having the student center as a model for other programs across the country, which is great. And as long as we get sufficient funding so that we can hire people to ensure that it doesn't detract from the work that we're currently doing here. And then finally, we have a film festival that we are planning for January. This will be the third year that we've worked with Sundance and Cool Hand Series to screen films and bring in actors and directors to talk about their films. And we're excited about some of the tentative folks who are gonna come out, some movie stars and the like, which I'm out of the loop on these things, but they apparently are impressive people. So I'm excited for that. And last but not least, I failed to introduce Tessa Brunenmeyer in our previous meeting. She's our new education manager, and she's finishing up a PhD. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself. I don't need to do that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm a PhD candidate in philosophy at the University of Rochester, but a Utah native, born and bred. No, well, mostly bred. I wasn't born here, but it feels like I was. Moved here when I was 2, so. So it's really good to be home and working with you.
Okay, Salt Lake Community College, we're doing very well. We're excited. It dawned on me the other day that our largest semester was back in spring of 2023. We had 40 classes running at that semester with approximately 250 students once the dust settled. That was a number that we could not sustain institutionally, and it became very difficult. It came with a significant investment on the part of the college, but that investment has paid off because since that time period, we've had 77 graduates with associate degrees, and we're going to have another 25 or so this year. So 100 graduates with associate degrees during this time period. I don't know that there's anything quite comparable to that we've accomplished with UDC during this time period. It's extraordinary, and it's because of this great partnership. Thank you so much. We are excited because with reallocated funding, we're going to take some funding. We're going to create a new position for an assistant director for prison education, and then revise the coordinator position to be able to focus on reintegration and academic efforts. And then portions of that reallocation will go to sustain adjunct pay. Most of our instructors that we hire are adjuncts. We have professors from the University of Utah. We have professors from Utah State University, and so that needs to be sustained. So we're excited about how that funding is going to be used. It's something that I've been pushing for a very long time, so that the infrastructure is there so the program can be successful for years to come. Our biggest challenge, though, continues to be accessing Pell, particularly with the problems with the Department of Education and government shutdowns, things that are happening throughout the country. Last year, Salt Lake Community College had to invest a significant amount of money to cover the Pell that we were not able to obtain from the Department of Education. I don't even want to talk about how much money. It was a lot. And because of these problems with the FAFSA Simplification Act is what caused, it was anything but, unfortunately, especially in the context of the prison. But we've been able to learn from this, and despite the challenges with the Department of Education, figure out ways to streamline this process, but we're still only seeing about 60% of our students successfully access Pell. We have some significant challenges that Snow and Denison don't face, including, as was mentioned, just the women's facility. The average woman in the state of Utah is incarcerated, between 18 months and 3 years. And many of our students are married, and then when they apply for that FAFSA, they have to have signatures and approval from their spouse. Oftentimes those spouses, we've found out, are incarcerated, even out of state. And so we have a 4.0 student, for example, whose husband is incarcerated in Wyoming. And so we have tried for 2 years to be able to get in contact with this man and get signatures so that she can access that federal aid unsuccessfully. And we, therefore, as an institution, have had to put her on state scholarship and cover that. That's our biggest challenge right now, is that it's It's not an easy process. It's an intense workload and very challenging and not as successful as it should be to get that Pell funding.
I'll discuss that in just a moment. Becky, is this what you were expecting?
What do you mean, with the council?
Yes.
I sit here and I'm just in awe of everything that you guys have been doing for all this time to make everything possible. And as you talk about reentry and you talk about the Board of Pardons and time cuts I flash back to my time in prison and getting to be, you know, Dan went out of his way above and beyond to make sure that I got to finish my IT program, right? Facilitating a space because my teacher was being taken to the men's side and they were getting rid of the program, and he made sure that I was able to do it in a space on, you know, on the computer where my teacher could tune in and talk to me over headphones, or Andy and all he's doing with University of Utah, you know, Salt Lake Community College. And, you know, I think about Ensign, you know, I absolutely would have been a part of that too, right? But
Yes, you will.
you all work so hard and I'm just impressed, and it just makes me more grateful for what you're doing. And I think about, you know, you, Melissa, going up to the prison and bringing music in. That has nothing to do with education or anything. You're just thinking of these people and what they need to lift them. So I just think that you're all just absolutely wonderful people, and what you're doing is, you know, the things that you said about the 6 things for reentry, and I'm like looking at that going, check, 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 check. Yes, those are very important things to be successful as you leave prison. And the education, he had a quote from a man, and he talked about how it gave him confidence. And I remember that as I started with Salt Lake Community College and feeling like I wasn't confident and I wasn't capable and I wasn't smart enough. And after, you know, finishing a class, I'm like, wow, I pulled an A on that. Oh my gosh. I remember I'm a smart woman, and, you know, getting into University of Utah and, you know, they elevate for what they're expecting. And, you know, it's amazing. And finishing IT, I thought my brain was going to explode, you know, so with the information, but I had a very patient teacher. And like you said, these people who, that face-to-face contact and having people say, hey, you can do this, or I believe in you, or, you know, whatever's going on to make sure that education happens and that one-on-ones and that belief in us. I think it's just amazing what all of you are doing here.
Well, thank you. We do have one more from UB Tech. Michelle, are you still on? Would you like to give us a quick overview before we close here?
You're good.
Michael, is it Michael? We're not sure. No.
It's Michelle. Sorry, we were struggling finding the button. So yes, thank you for remembering us. We don't have a lot of updates here at UB Tech. Mostly just we are not currently at our cap. So Chief Honey, Kelsey, feel free to send students our way. And do we have anything else, Scott?
I don't think so.
I think that's about
Thank you for letting me know. I'll make sure I'll get on that right now.
Well, thank you for that. And I think that brings me to just before, do we have any comments from the public before I sum here? I don't see any. So let me just sum with a couple of things. I actually did go into the state correctional facility. I performed in Carnegie Hall last Saturday. So the world-renowned violinist that I performed with, David Park, we went and we got a Fazioli piano brought into the prison. And he brought his beautiful violin, and we both performed for the women, and bringing that Bach and Saint-Saëns and Beethoven and the really just fine music that Carnegie, New York quality to the women's facility. I want to end with just, I think, 2 main things. One of them is as we consider the funding moving forward, I will request as soon as you're able to look at your institutions, what your wish list is that you see for growth, and please get it to Taylor and Richard as soon as possible so that can be included, because even though UDC has been funding it to date, we need to act as if we do not have a telephone surcharge available. And so I think we will count it as ground zero as we have this base budget. And I think as we consider moving forward to figure out so that the institutions are not absorbing the cost of Pell, not going through or going through, or tuition issues and scholarships, I think that needs to be a priority for 2026 as we figure out our funding mechanism and model. And I also want to turn to NGOs. I want to find out, can we get NGOs to donate for scholarships? And I love the idea of the skin in the game for the inmates to give a little and they'll get it back upon completion, right? So if we can identify some NGOs who'd be willing to help partner for those scholarships, I think it's going to simplify the paperwork and the headache of Pell and other things. And so I think that would be a great way. And then the last thing I want to talk about has to do with Helen Hansen, actually, in DWS. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, really aligning with reentry and parole with the community of what we're doing for education, employment, housing, medical, and continuing their treatment. I've come up with and had some discussions with DWS about the Olin Walker Fund for housing. And one thing that I'm working on that I think is a model that we can replicate and work on with reentry is if these individuals really do points 1.5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 before they get out, and they have really shown that they are wanting change and they've done their due diligence in preparing to get out, that we could help identify their job before they get out, but identify a housing option close to their work and provide a short-term housing scholarship, so to speak, that is paid for. Employers who hire those with a felony record can apply for a federal, I don't know if it's a tax credit. I want to go to the chambers and encourage these employers to actually take that money, give it to the Olin Walker Foundation, have some NGOs who have already expressed some interest in helping with homelessness and housing to actually give to that fund, that for those individuals who are getting a short-term housing stipend, their employer has eyes on them. I've matched it, or I'm donating to it. I know you're part of this program. You're in a housing unit that's close to work. There has to be a medical component every 30 days to check in with whatever their medical needs are. Keeping that employment, doing everything that they need to do with their parole officer, and it's skin in the game for accountability. I know that there's been proposals in the homeless statewide board that Randy Shumway recently gave of an accountability center. I'd like to take that model with reentry for this opportunity for those that are really doing their due diligence for a change in their life when they get out. That the short-term housing stipend is really even a mentor with a bank or a credit union to help them with their managing their money, managing their budget, that they will have all these mentors helping them to eventually pay for their own housing and their own rent, whatever it may be. So it is all encompassing, but I think it's a financial model that could sustain itself. I would rather have the legislature, instead of $75 million for a homeless campus that is for 1,300 beds, when we have people who want to get into housing and want to pay rent. I think I'd rather have, and we'll see what the legislature does, but I'd rather have investment into really helping people who are wanting and ready to help themselves, but just need that little short-term and mentorship and stepping stone to really be able to be self-sufficient. So that's my goal, is to be able to have this all-encompassing entity with reentry, parole, and the community, so that the rest of us are not paying 10 times over for for people on the streets that just don't have that, that team to help them. So I want to thank all of you. I want to put a last plug in for Yushi, because as you're putting in their final report, I think this is the marketing opportunity to make sure that the marketing specialist puts the messaging together of what is happening with UDC, with education, so that it's that marketing message that we can take to the legislature, as Senator McKell said, to really say, this is why this matters and why they're not seeing the Board of Pardons again in a few months or in a few years. So thank you to all of you for being here. Appreciate your work.
Thank you.
We have to adjourn the meeting.
Is there a motion to adjourn? We just had that from David Bakaboy. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed can stay sitting.
Thank you, everyone.
Say that again.
For people who are new to the parking garage, there's a QR code here to scan to your parking.